So, traditionally, SolarWinds, as I said, started off all about SNMP, which is a horrible standard, but also the best ever, having now worked with lots and lots and lots of different technologies. Storage is the worst, and SNMP, as awful as it is, because storage has
SMIS, but
storage has this thing, SMIS.
Write those things, you're right, it's terrible.
Well, everybody follows it. They just follow it completely differently, right? So that's when we look at standards, we're like, yeah, okay, in name there's one. SNMP is one where pretty much everybody does follow it, and MIBs are kind of dumb and 50 years old, but they work. So the product is always really focused on that. Has done APIs where vendors don't provide SNMP. But when we look at what's the next sort of technology source, what's the next data source to add to our networking portfolio, we think it's deep packet inspection. One of the things that we think is interesting about it, lots of people do it, but today that market, it involves mostly appliances that are very, very expensive, that people are spending often hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're buying these really expensive devices, they're deploying them. It takes a lot of knowledge. And what it means is for our typical customer, they can't afford it. So our typical customer is interested in answering the questions that DPI can answer, but they can't really get at it. So what we've been looking at is coming up with sort of a technical way to pull it into NPM. And that doesn't mean we would deliver everything you would get from a $100,000 appliance, but we think we could deliver significant value. And I think Joel is going to sort of whiteboard how we're kind of planning to build it. I mean, one question I have before that, you guys, a lot of you use the product. Would you expect DPI to be something that's really a separate module on top of NPM, or do you think that's a natural inclusion in the product?
It depends, to borrow from the man himself. I suppose it would depend on how you're going to use it. If it's a tack-on feature, if it's integrated in the core of the application, no. I'd expect that to be part of your license. If it's a tack-on, bolt-on feature you add to certain aspects of NPM, well, maybe.
Okay.
But I suppose it's not a point of difference for a lot of solutions. It's because it's slowly achieving ubiquity. It doesn't separate you. It's like the industry will expect it. I don't know. You walk a line, in my opinion. Like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. From commercially, I see if you don't charge for it, or it could be bad, but you might get a bit more traction from your followers if it's included.
Well, there's just another practical standpoint there. Customers I have that have a lot of SolarWinds modules, there's a lot of configuration that goes into that, right? Because NCM and NTA and NPM and APM, they're all a little bit different, right? They all require a separate database in there, Mm-hmm. So one more module is kind of a detractor in my opinion. Yeah, it lets you modularize the whether somebody needs to pay for that feature or not, but on the other hand, it's one more interface we got to click into, and the interface is a little bit different and all that kind of thing. Right? So
I can tell you this is sort of what we're thinking, and we're just kicking it off, so nothing's finalized. What we're thinking is that we would sort of build it into the core as just a foundational technology, which would then provide some features in NPM, provide some features in NTA, provide some features actually in server and application monitor. Right? Once you've got DPI, then it's just up for the applications to consume them. And it would come with basically the Orion server would probably act as a probe to collect data, and we might just throw in one or two more additional probes for free. And then if you want more probes beyond that, then we would start charging you. Because the way we want to think about it is, look, the majority of people, it'll just be rolled in. But then the guys who are using a lot of it, that have very large environments, will pay more.
How would you manage the potential performance impact of rolling that into the core product? Because one of the challenges that I've had with SolarWinds deployments is just the amount of resources it eats up on a box, slow performance in the GUI, trying to pull data and get reporting out of it. Everything's a wait.
Yeah, so a couple of things that we are doing. So the main reason why we actually want to include a probe on the main Orion server is really for the eval use case. We want to be able to show people the value of getting their DPI data bubbling up whenever they download and install the product. So some of the thought process that we have right now is that we're going to probably throttle what that probe is capable of doing on the Orion server so that it basically doesn't take over the overall performance on that machine. And that if you actually want to kind of move past a certain level of, kind of packets per second or bandwidth utilization, things like that, you basically are going to have to roll out another probe that basically you're going to, and we're talking about right now, either having Windows-based probe, but we also have virtual appliance-based probe. And also we will also have, that virtual appliance will be based on a Linux-based architecture. So we are talking also about potentially having that, being able to be rolling it out onto a bare metal hardware if you want to. So the idea is to really try to limit the impact of that probe on the main Orion server just to avoid the use case that you just talked about there. I mean, we are intimately aware of us taking over that machine in a very kind of hard way, especially if you've got multiple modules installed, especially if you have NTA installed right now. That's kind of our worst nightmare, but we have a solution also in the works for that.
Well, yeah, at NTA, so we know that's the biggest culprit because that's just a crazy amount of data. And that's another example of we inherited a solution that wrote everything into SQL, which was not a good idea.
That is
a lot of SQL
look,
churn.
This is the first product. My first day at work at SolarWinds on January 8, 2007 was to work and fix NetFlow v1. And I worked on 1.1, and then since then, it's been the pain of my existence over the past 7 years to go back and having to fix incrementally that thing over and over. I believe now that with the release that's coming, the next release that's coming out, that we have finally a scalable solution that actually go away from storing data into SQL. Basically, we'd have a dedicated storage engine with an index structure that is very, very compatible with the type of queries that are being made on top of NetFlow data. Because if you think about it, when you do a NetFlow kind of query over NetFlow data, you have a bunch of dimensions that you're fixing, like give me, the protocols or the IP address with this type of protocol in this, on this kind of network device. And so you're fixing a bunch of those. And so if you're familiar with OLAP cubes, for instance, well, that's exactly what an OLAP cube does, basically. It has a bunch of dimensions, and you're slicing and dicing the data in a very kind of granular manner based on, fixing those dimensions. Well, there's a structure that's called bitmap indexes that is basically typically used by those kind of implementations, and that's what we're using basically here now for NetFlow. So it's actually going to be a file-based, of course, type of storage with a dedicated kind of index system based on bitmapped index for accessing the data, so that we actually have, we can do the type of queries when you do ANDs and ORs. Those bitmap index, actually, you just do ANDs and ORs just like you would do on bits, and so it's very effective and very fast to operate. From some of the perf that we've been seeing, we see a kind of a huge improvement in the insertion rate, especially on the also the resource utilization for that insertion rate on those servers. And we also see for most of the queries, just query improvement on the data. And the beauty of it with this solution is that that's over raw data. It's over the detailed data that we can query. It's not over the aggregated data like we did before. And so we kind of end up with the best of both worlds in that situation.
It's taken 6 years because we paid for. It was sort of done. Like, we don't take responsibility for it. We got there. It was sort of in process. Was not done architected the best way, but it sold like crazy anyhow. And so we spent a lot of time trying to just make it better without re-architecting it. There's just so many customers. So it's taken a long time because we're going to have all these thousands of NTA customers that we need to cleanly migrate to this new system. Because, if 5% have problems, it will just overwhelm us. So it's, you've got to design it, which wasn't easy, rebuild everything on top of it, and then build the migration. So we're very excited about having it because everyone who has NetFlow will see a huge improvement in the rest of the system.
good. What are you looking at intake-wise for the deep packet inspection stuff? I mean, how are you going to get that from the devices?
We're going to rely on span ports right now. Okay. So we're not going to do tap at this point, but span ports. And things that we are looking at also is in the virtual world, directly hook up into some of the APIs that VMware has, so that you don't actually have to create a span port. But they have some of the APIs that they use for the security level, where basically all the packets are going through there. So we might be able to leverage that and actually get a solution that is based on that.
Would you be able to terminate ER span?
I don't know that.
I don't know either.
That would give you a lot more flexibility.
Yeah.
Because otherwise,
nobody wants to pipe every single VLAN into a server for.
No, you're pinned to a switch otherwise, and that's not very. That's a bit sour taste in the mouth, maybe. I would suggest.
It looks like that's something that I would like to do.
Yes.
I have to check with the dev team if that's what they have, and your team to see if that's what they've.
I'm sure you can. I'm positive you can do it.
You guys are pretty smart. You'll figure it out.
You'd be shooting yourself in the foot if you didn't. Let's put it that way.
And so some of the things that we're looking at, so I think some incantation of the DPI data is going to come and basically kind of aggregate and then show up like application response time, that type of thing.
I can show you a screenshot of it.
Some of that.
We don't. It's not built yet because we're just starting. But the the UI design team has done a few mock-ups.
Is it wired port only you're talking about, or
the what?
Talking wired only configurations? Are you actually looking at controller based, being able to stuff off for wireless in addition? So you can look at like funky things with Bonjour services and things of that nature.
I suppose you would span the controller port.
You can span the controller port, but that doesn't
get
everything out of the airspace.
No, that's true.
I don't know.
Strictly right now.
No, so our goal is to try to get at a point where you have aggregation going on, so that you don't actually have to tap, every single device, in your organization. No, the reachability of that and the feasibility of that, I think we are learning more as we go, basically in the design of this feature to kind of figure out how customers will actually use that, and what and that type of feedback is what kind of we're looking for also. You're on.
The more you think about it, actually, how you're looking to license it, it's actually 2. I reckon, after 3, it's not bad. I'm just thinking of my particular use case, or something like that. It would work. It's a balance. It's a balance between being business mindset and also not screwing your customers.
Right, because we're thinking about this just in terms of like the concept of additional pollers that we have, for scalability. But here we kind of want to give some, as we don't want to kill the main Orion server by, just allowing it to kind of get all the data.
And another question was, with your fixes to your database, how you spoke about optimizing
for NetFlow.
Will that help you speed the GUI up? I have issues. I've used large deployments which are very
definitely
slow.
Because we have optimized where we are solving the problem of insertion speed and resource utilization, and basically also query speed. Because of the new indexing scheme that we have, it's a lot faster to actually query. And as I said, it's not querying, you're now querying the detailed data. You can actually possibly keep 6 months or up what you want of, detailed data and still query and get response basically within, a time frame that is okay, and not having to wait 30 hours for your query to execute.
I've driven some systems of some people in this room, and they're very slow, just due to the scale and the size. And is there anything to help speed that up? Is spot on.
Yep.
Cool, thank you.
Sorry to say, they don't even need to be large.
No, you're right.
I mean, it's just
was being polite.
It's a fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, you guys have to fix the speed of using NPM and using NTM. I mean, it's the complaint that I get from all my customers. I have a lot of customers that use SolarWinds, and that's always the complaint every single time. The product is too slow to be helpful.
Too slow from a GUI perspective, particularly because that's what they see.
Yeah. I mean, just drilling in on NPM or whatever it is, right? I mean, looking at interface stats, and it's just slow.
Okay. Well, that's good feedback.
I think it's good feedback, absolutely.
This is sort of the idea behind it is that you use DPI, you would define applications and what are the protocols that are involved in that application. And then you'd get a quality of experience page that would be new that you don't have now, so that you could look at like HTTP or SSH. And then it should sort of look like a typical SolarWinds page. You could break things down for sort of mission critical versus non-mission critical applications. So you could sort of say which ones you really want to monitor. And then you're going to be able to get an area graph looking at, it's a little blurry, of response time by application. Right, you could look at transmission and the amount and the data volume. Where
is your goal here to kind of get the same display that you guys are able to do with APM for cases where you don't have an agent on the server? Is that?
Yeah, I think it's giving us application response time, if you want, but coming from the network. And so it's more of a kind of end user experience to some extent, because that's really what people are experiencing due to the network latency and things like that.
Yeah.
So it might not be an application in the way that Sam would define an application. Like Sam's looking at the SQL server, but this would probably be looking at
like the service, the tables that are used and things like that. It's kind of more complementary to that. It's kind of more a black, I would say almost a white box. I see traffic on this, hitting this port. Well, what's the time between, the request and the response to be served? And so basically we're going to get that from there.
So this is like complementary to the network traffic flow analyzer? Or
yeah, and so when we get to, so we're going to ship, when we ship this, the plan is for NPM and NTA to both get new resources, new features, because there's data that just isn't in NetFlow. Specifically, look, there's some apps you can identify and some you just can't, right? The Cisco tried its in-bar and stuff like that, and nothing's been particularly satisfactory. So that's one of the reasons we think ultimately everybody you have to go to DPI if you want to figure out what's going on at the next level of granularity. So this would be, if you'd still have the flow traffic, we don't think people are going to put DPI everywhere that they put flow. We figure that there's certain things where you really want to get into that level of detail, and you'd be able to deploy probes to do that, and it would just enhance wherever it is. And so
Where are you planning on going then? Because, there's already tools like NTOP, which gives a fair amount of output, and you can get probes for those. And they're open source projects. Hard to compete with free sometimes, right?
We think we're going to go deeper than NTOP. Like we do recommend NTOP to customers a fair bit, but we don't think it can give us everything. It can't solve all the problems we think we're hearing from customers.
Okay, fair enough.
And again, most customers won't really pay anything extra.
And I think a lot of the complication with DPI is just the protocol classification and keeping track and keeping up with the new protocols, or protocols that are changing ports, or all that. That's really what
encryption.
I think the value of that. Well, yeah. Yes, that's yet another problem. I think that at first it will do some level of this decryption for things that are capable of, but in terms of adding a proxy, for instance, things like that, to be able to do kind of man-in-the-middle type of decryption, that's not going to be in V1.
Well, forget about decryption for now. One of the things that I was thinking about just when I first saw this was the concept of tunneled traffic. Not talking about network virtualization, but users using SSH tunnels for proxying HTTP traffic, IPv6. All of the tunnel garbage that's out there.
Those are all transparent. Just block protocol 41 and you're fine.
Yeah. Well,
Sure.
it'd be interesting to just see. It'd be interesting to have that visualization, here, so kind of what the state of those mechanisms are.
All right. Are you going to do the next step and do page reassembly per user or email rows? You can rebuild anything that's appearing on people's browsers. You can rebuild anything.
That's where I think that would probably be a request you'd hear from the server guys, whoever is responsible for that.
NSA.
What the first step is, let's get the technology in there, provide, and And what we end up building will be largely driven by customers. Like this is the very first mock-up, and I almost had to pry it out of the designer's hand. I'm like, look, I just want to show it. You're not committed. She's like, no, I haven't talked to customers yet. I'm like, it's going to be okay. So really,
it looks similar to your NetFlow traffic analyzer, right?
It's almost certainly going to be similar, right?
And for good reason, right? I mean, you're going to re-leverage.
Yeah. I think one of the goals also is to provide the details that NetFlow doesn't provide. Like, it's great to tell me that, I've got SMB traffic on my network, okay, and it's using, 55% of my bandwidth, okay, which files?
What's in the payload? Right?
Yes, exactly. And I think that's the next question, and that's kind of what I've been, asking the PMs also is, well, it's great, you're giving me that level of information, though. I want to click no and give me more of the details.
So are you trying to look at saying, well, the next natural extension is some sort of data loss prevention stuff? Because
I mean, it can be a slippery slope, right? Because you go too deep into that, now you're doing DLP, and now you're doing packet capture, and now you're doing right.
I don't think we want to do that,
right? I mean, what?
No, and that's what I mean. We are not. I mean, again, you're doing active management. You're a platform player at that point. I think that's the delineation. I think that doesn't fit into Orion. Never say never, but that's not an Orion product. That's not an extension to NPM.
Now, this is really answering questions that our customers say. You go almost to the answer, and then I have to figure it out. Look, one of the things we like to do is a lot of times where people are breaking out Wireshark now, we could say, well, you won't have to because the information will be available for you right in the Orion console, right? Not every case, but a lot more.
You do have some competitive threats here from SDN. So that data that you're showing on the screen is now being provided by SDN platform. So NewArch and Contrail have those charts for each VM.
Sure.
Because they collect it as part of their flow records.
Sure, but the question is it's that overall hybrid world where you have, just SDN, virtualized, non-virtualized environment and things like that, and do they provide you that level of visibility across everything?
Well, and they're going to be
software, right?
Yeah, they're going to be a fraction of the networking in the world, a tiny fraction for a few years.
I didn't say it would.
But you're right. Like,
okay, so the competitive space is. Plug them in. What does your technology look like? Forgot to plug in when I came back from the crapper.
Thanks for sharing, Greg.
Plug in first.
TMI.
So, just to recap the question, the answer is there is, in the SDN space, with the flow switching, they have this access to very similar data to what you're actually doing. And because you're doing it in the server itself, the vendors in the SDN space are showing all signs of doing DPI in the vSwitch, right? Which means you can actually get per application, per service, per server. You can't do, and you're right, there's still a space for this in the WAN or at the WAN edge or in the branch, right? But that's also probably going to change over time. So what we'll actually see, or what I expect to see over a 5-year, 10-year horizon, is that the SDN vSwitches will go right the way to the edge. So your edge routers will be vSwitch enabled, and they will actually then pick it up and then trunk the traffic back over tunnels, or whether we're using flow, but some sort of flow-based technology will be used right at the edge. They will then have the instrumentation to be able to do that at the edge. So today we're already looking at functions like NFV, where we put an x86 server out at a branch office. We run one which is a proxy, one which is a web server, then a SharePoint, then another VM which is the file share, and then another one which is the router, and another one which is the firewall. Okay, and so you're going to use the hypervisor, so you'll have all of these functions in the vSwitch code. And that is what I think over 5 to 10 years. So you're just, as a product threat, when you're evaluating your positioning on this and what your forward revenues look like, just be aware that the networking landscape is significantly changing, and the concept of using probes to be a data collection point will probably go away, because we'll be able to use the inherent capabilities.
Yeah, if we can get it from basically the equivalent of a hypervisor and pull it in, but then again, to the extent that your network is a hybrid, we would be able to use this on the legacy side, pull their data, and give a unified view. Yeah, there's no question the networking world is about to change more than it's changed in decades.
Yes.
And everybody's going to have to try and keep up. The one thing though is all the kind of hardware and stuff that people have now isn't just going to disappear. That's So we do know there's going to be just a market for managing the so-called legacy stuff for a long time. But if we don't have some play into the new world, we're going to be screwed. You got that?
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Yeah, but I think that the other aspect is, okay, that's networking data, that's DPI data there. And sure, if you take it in isolation of the rest, then I think that's very limiting. But I think one of the things that we bring to the table is we can stitch that back to the rest. It's that kind of end-to-end picture, really, of, it's my app and the whole stack that app relies on. And I think that's where, we can still have some advantage over time compared to where we are right now, where, we are just at the beginning of really stitching all that data together.